Good morning. My name is Boaz Pauli. I'm from the United Nations Development Program. I'm the Chief Creative Officer for my organization. We're bringing you today a live broadcast from the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity. This is the third day of our live broadcast, together with our partners, Deloitte Digital, the Public Foundation, and our broadcast partner, We Don't Have Time. We are very glad that you joined us this morning. We have a very exciting program on day 3. We're going to hear from various people who have moved the needle on the force of creativity for good, the magic of creativity to create positive impact for the common good across the world through the idea of creativity. We'll hear from Jakob Trollback, who is the person behind the SDG icons. We'll hear from the chairman of the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity, Mr. Phil Thomas. We'll hear from various other thought leaders across creativity and brands, and we're very excited to get going. But first, we'll hear from the legendary Sir John Haggerty.
I look at you, yeah.
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 John, you are one of the leaders of the idea of bringing creativity as a force of good. You started it, you're a pioneer of it. You're one of the forces that brought the SDGs to the Cannes Lions. You've worked with many, many organizations to bring the power of creativity for the common good. In this world where we have so much clutter, where there is so much going on, where there's so much information, what do you think really breaks through? How do we get those messages out, those messages of the common good out?
Well, we are living in a world where there is a huge amount of average, I call it. We're overwhelmed with kind of messages, advertising messages, marketing messages, whatever. On all kinds of fronts, about all kinds of things. And I've always talked about, obviously because I come from the creative world, and I've always talked about the power of great ideas, of how, one, efficient they are, how inspiring they are, and how they can help create change. I mean, people always forget, advertising is an industry that's trying to sell you stuff. That's what it's there to do, and that keeps people in jobs and something like that. Hopefully the stuff they're selling you is good. But it's also an industry that can help create change. And it can create change, and it has done. I worked on anti-smoking campaigns in the 1970s, and it can create change, but it needs great creativity to make that happen. Outstanding creativity that captures people's imagination. That's what it needs to do.
How did you first kind of come to the conclusion that creativity needs to be a force for good? Was it a personal experience for you?
Well, yes, it was. I mean, I went to art school and had a fantastic art school training. Then I went to a design school, and then from there I went into advertising. But I was part of a generation that came into advertising that said it can be better. I mean, I didn't actually want to go into advertising because 90% of what I saw was absolute rubbish. I thought it was garbage. Why would I want to do that? Why do you want to do that? But there were a small group of people who said, and the revolution started in the 60s in New York, that said actually it can do great things and it can be a force for good, not only in what it does, but how it speaks to people, how it inspires people, how it can be something that you love talking about and being part of. So we were part of that generation that came into advertising in that time. And then throughout my career in advertising, I've seen how great creativity really, really can change the way people feel or think in a positive way. Obviously, you can use creativity in bad ways, and people have done that. But we were trying to make it better.
And then the SDGs came around, and you really kind of jumped on that. And so what inspired you to do that? How did you get involved in that?
Well, I initially got involved with it because Cheryl Warnell of Sawa said to me, that the cinema industry is going to be creating this space, giving this space for the UN World Food Programme. But first of all, it was Project Everyone. Would I help with the creative work. And of course, I thought this was absolutely wonderful. I loved what they were doing. I loved the way they were thinking. And so that was how I got involved, because I've always felt that creativity should be used for good. That's what we're there for. That's what we need to do. And so I got involved in that. And then we then extended that into the World Food Programme. And we helped develop some cinema commercials so that people could understand the problem and contribute to helping alleviate it.
I'm going to come back to the World Food Programme in a second, because that's a really interesting case study, I think, of what you're actually doing. But do you think at this time, 2023, you know, we really need acceleration? Is the industry doing enough? Is there enough force for good in creativity right now, as you see it?
My honest answer, no. I'm here at Cannes, and I've been giving talks, and I'm talking about how we've got to see creativity as a green initiative, because a better idea doesn't need so much energy behind it to get people to listen and to be inspired by it. So I'm trying to reframe the way people look at creativity, that if they're concerned about their global footprint, and most of the organizations here are, but they don't, when they come to their communications, they don't go, but if I had a better idea, it would be greener because I wouldn't need to spend so much pushing it out there. Because at the moment, you know, I'm trying to get them to think about, you know, fast fashion cannot continue. It cannot continue. The planet cannot go on producing these clothing and having it discarded. Well, I could say the same about advertising. Fast advertising cannot continue. We cannot go on producing average, because average is just clutter. And it's costing a huge amount of money to push that clutter out to people who are then ignoring it. This is the absurdity. They're ignoring it. But a great idea, people will pay attention to, and they'll talk about it, and they'll talk to their friends about it. And in that way, it becomes a greener way of communicating with people. So we've got to think about great creativity as a green initiative.
That's an incredible idea. It's like it's taking it to the next level, because you're saying that the actual creative industry itself needs to be more sustainable by being better.
Yes. I mean, it's very interesting. The Advertising Association in the UK have given 5 pillars for how to make the industry greener. Not one of them talks about making better ideas. It doesn't go, and the 6th pillar is if you make a better idea, you don't have to spend so much money on it. You don't have to spend so much energy getting it out there. They don't talk about it. It's like we've missed the major point. Creativity. I mean, I watched The Godfather about 2 weeks ago, made in 1975. I mean, what a brilliant, brilliant film. And then I watched Godfather 2, brilliant film. You know, think about it like that. Also, you know, in the world of advertising, we have amazing advertising campaigns. You know, some done for Apple, we did some for Levi's, that people still talk about. Absolutely. And they were made in 1980, 1985, 1984, and people are still talking about them. How efficient is that? So great creativity is a green initiative. Think about it like that.
That's an amazing way to think about it. I really hope that the industry takes that on board.
I really do. I'm pushing it as much as I can. It's getting a fair bit of traction, but let's see.
That's incredible. If you look at the award winners in the advertising space in the past few years, and I'm sure this year, do you see many winners that are using advertisement as a force for good, as a force for purpose? Who's driving this, and what stands in its way? What's the situation out there?
Well, I take a slightly more controversial view of this, that I think advertising should be used to promote those products that are treating the planet fairly, that are employing people fairly, that are paying third world countries correctly. So I do get slightly worried about brands that just adopt green trying to adopt green credentials to say, buy us because, hey, we think the planet's warming and we've all got to do something about it. Whilst over here, they're kind of not paying people properly, they're not making the product as efficiently as they could, they're not treating people properly. So I kind of go, I want people to put their houses in order first, and then tell me, you know, we should buy this because we make it in a sustainable way. Please make it in a sustainable way first, then come to me with your message. I slightly get, you know, it's called greenwashing, we all know that. I get slightly concerned that a lot of brands are just saying, all we have to do is adopt the attitude, not the practices. And that really worries me.
You know, I have the same worry, of course, but over the last, not very long, perhaps 8 months, maybe a year, we are seeing a little bit of a sea change where corporates are starting to really think about sustainability as part of their core business. What we'd like to see is that then that transfers into sustainability as part of all of their ways that they're working, including the CMO, including their advertising, including that in the force for good, because you know, corporations have an enormous amount of power to influence individuals to take action, and so we want to see that change as well. Do you think that might happen?
I think that's a very good point. I absolutely hope it does happen. I think it will happen. I think it'll happen more because people pressurize those organizations, and we've got to make them realize you've got to be green with everything. You can't just be green. I'll be green over here, and you know, I'll do some other stuff over here that isn't green. Sorry, if you want to be that, then it infects everything you do. It is a cause you are on, and it applies to so many things. But I'm not against. I'm really, really excited by the fact that they're beginning to talk about this. I want them to go further, and I want to look at everything that they do, not just bits of it. Everything. There was a story once, and somebody said to me, a brand, I won't say who it was, years ago, said, I want to be the best grocery product in the UK. I want to be the best. And I said, that's a fantastic, well, that's a great ambition. I said, why have you got the shittiest lobby? And he went, what do you mean? And I said, well, your reception area is terrible. It's awful. It's crappy. I said, how can you be the best and yet have this crappy reception? At what point do you stop being the best? You've got to be the best across everything. So that the instant I come across you, I go, wow, this is impressive. And you've got to do the same with green issues. Everything has got to be about it. Nothing must be left untouched.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. You mentioned your work with the World Food Program before. You made a film that the global cinema for the global cinema medium in particular. I want to show the film from 2019 called "Feed Our Future." If you don't mind, can we roll the video, please?
Wherever I am always walking with you. I'm always walking with you, but I look and you're not there. Whoever I meet, I'm always talking to you. I'm always talking to you. In them said that you can't tell. Said that you can't tell. It always ends up to one thing. When I look and you're not there.
That's a incredibly emotional film. It's a heartbreaking. I mean, I've seen it many times, but every time I see it, it's emotional over and over again. What did it take to make that film? What was the journey like?
Well, what I wanted to do was to have an idea that didn't just take pity, because you know I see so much charity work that, oh, these poor people, pity them, pity them, pity them. I wanted people to think about, this is what you're losing. It applies to you. So these children that we're losing could be the next person to invent some incredible technology that saves the planet, that could find a way of curing cancer. every time we lose a child, we all lose, because they're a resource of the possibility of a solution. So I wanted it to kind of try and hit people like that in that way, and that including you. So, you know, you can't just go, oh, I'll give them money, yes, that's terrible. But this is a loss for all of us, and including people. So that was the journey of it. And then finding a way of communicating that people did want to see, that did want to go on watching, that did want to go on talking about it. And we were very lucky to get the music from Yusuf Stevens, previously known as Cat Stevens, who gave us the money, that gave us the rights to use it for nothing. So he said, please use it. And we said, can we use it in other media? He said, of course. Please go ahead and use it. So terrific contribution from somebody like that, because music is a very powerful force in communication. I mean, throughout the history of, you know, we march to music, we applaud to music, we cry to music. And so getting the right piece of music, very, very important for that. And we are absolutely indebted to Yusuf Stevens for actually giving us that and supporting us. So that was absolutely brilliant.
It's such a brilliant piece of work. It's like, for me as a father, it hits me as like I see my children there.
Yes, you see your own children.
Yeah.
Imagine if they were disappearing, and how much we would lose.
Absolutely. We've only got a few minutes left of this. I wish we could go on forever, because it's so wonderful to talk to you. But we only have a few minutes left. We're in Cannes now. We're in the middle of the creative industry. Everyone is wanting to hear what's next. What's your call to action? What's your inspiration? What do you want? What do you want to happen?
Well, what do I want to happen and what will happen aren't necessarily the same things. Well, the first thing I always say to everybody is one, never predict the future, because you'll get it wrong. But I always say to people, do interesting things, and interesting things will happen to you. And what I would like to see the industry move away from, the media strategy that has developed over the last 10 or 15 years in the world of advertising, is stalking. I follow you, I stalk you, as opposed to inspiring you. So I would like to see the industry move back to a kind of philosophy of inspiring people to come to something. And we've lost that, in my view. I've said that before on many occasions. So I would like to see the future of the communications industry, and I call it that in the broadest sense, of inspiring people to make change, and to make change for good.
Well, that's an incredible way to end this talk. Again, as I wish I could sit here all day and talk to you. I'm sure you don't have time, but
it's a pleasure.
but thank you so much for joining us. Up next is Nick Garrett, the Deloitte leader for marketing and commerce in Deloitte Digital. He will have a conversation with Phil Thomas, the chairman of the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity, and the chairman of Essential Intelligence Cannes Lions. So please keep watching, and we'll be up very shortly with Nick. Thank you so much.
That was brilliant.
G'day everyone. It's a real honour to be here today with Phil Thomas, the chairman of Cannes. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. And
the pleasure.
It's a very special and important week. So, Phil, you must be the busiest person in Cannes this week. Tell us a little about your schedule, how you're working, all the things you've got to do, and how do you fit sleep into this week?
Well, we were talking a bit about this earlier on, Nick, and what people I think maybe don't realise, people who are in Cannes don't realise just how much time we spend with the juries and on the work itself. And people would be really surprised how much time that takes up. I think people in Cannes think it's all about all the stuff outside of the Palais, but it's absolutely not. So we do spend a lot of time on there, and then I spend a lot of time meeting, the agency leaders and the brands and the platforms, and trying to really, I suppose, talk to them about how we're going to develop the festival and what they're looking for from the festival. And then I try and get to bed as early as I can, because I have to get up really early.
And tell us why and how you introduced the SDG Awards. What was the onus and the thinking behind that? Because it was quite a monumental moment when it happened.
Yeah, what we found over the years is that the creative community, the Cannes community, so to speak, is incredibly generous with their creativity, right? So they spend every day solving problems and trying to change people's minds. And every time we do anything that tries to bring them together to use that creativity to make the world a better place, they're just so incredibly generous with their creativity. And I think there are loads of reasons for that. Now, we have done various competitions and bits and pieces in the past. We had a big thing with the Gates Foundation for a while. And so it's something that we'd be really interested in. But what we realized was the most important thing is a lion, right? So if you actually make a lion, then people really do take it seriously. So we just decided that there'd be an opportunity to create a lion around the SDGs, 17 categories, one per SDG. We talked to the UN about it. They were really keen. And the whole point of it, of course, is to try to focus creativity on these massive issues and hoping that the creative community can help to solve them. So that was the thinking.
Awesome. For an organisation that is seen as a very profit-driven, right, and fair enough, what was the rationale of giving all the entry fees away to the amazing causes?
I suppose we thought, look, if when we introduce a category, that's obviously a revenue-generating thing for us. And we just felt it didn't sit well, firstly. If you're going to launch a category about the SDGs and then you keep the money, it just didn't feel right. But actually, more importantly, we thought, well, hang on a minute. Some of these ideas are going to be quite nascent. They're going to need development. The ideas are going to need curating and improving and amplifying. So wouldn't it be a good idea if we actually invested that money into those ideas? So we do that in the Glass Lion as well. So the Glass Lion is obviously mainly about gender, and we give those profits away as well, the revenues away. And we've given about €2 million in the last few years to the causes. So we just feel it's just something that we're trying to give back, really.
And I can talk from personal experience. I worked on the Lion's Share and was the recipient of the Grand Prix in 19.
Congratulations.
And that amount of money absolutely amplified and accelerated so many things we were trying to do. It was quite fundamental at an early stage.
That's great.
So sort of on that track and theme, from the campaign that won the first SDG, which was the Palau Pledge, and moving onwards, and you've given money to these causes, have you seen a change in behaviour? Have you seen a shift in dynamics? Have you seen momentum going behind some of the ones that may have won in previous time, and you follow their acceleration or movement or growth or their journey?
We're in constant touch actually with the Palau Pledge, and they've been really good at keeping us informed. I mean, the feedback they've got is the first thing is when you win the Grand Prix at Cannes and the SDG Grand Prix, you're able to open doors, have conversations, and begin the kind of amplification process. And what they wanted to do, I mean, for those who don't know the idea, it was about protecting Palau by having all visitors, make a pledge that they're going to look after the.
It was beautiful work.
Yeah, it was amazing work. It won big, and really what they wanted to do was to try to spread that idea to other countries and other nations, and that's what they needed the investment for. And as you probably know, they did. They started talking to other, some of the Pacific islands. They talked to Iceland about it. There are other governments that are really interested in it. And it's been ongoing,
Yep.
and they come back to us and they ask us for introductions and amplifications. But I think they've found that quite useful. So firstly, the amplification you get by just winning the thing, as you would have found with the Lion's Share,
Yep.
which is a brilliant idea. But then obviously you've then got some actual hard cash behind you to do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome hearing that.
Yeah.
Last year, as we saw from Greenpeace, Cannes Lion was a target, or at least a potential target for activists. As it relates to the topics of SDG goals themselves, how do you reconcile, on one hand, being a supporter of the SDGs, and a wonderful one, but on another side, 20,000 plus, maybe it's 30,000 people flying in, coming here for the festival.
Yeah.
It's a hard place to be probably sometimes.
It is a hard place to be. I mean, I think the protesters specifically were actually protesting a little bit about the holding companies working for fossil fuels, which doesn't get us off the hook at all, but I think that's what they were specifically. But that's not the point, really. I think the point is we are a very large global event, and we've got a massive responsibility to do the right thing. So there are a couple of things we're doing. So the first is that this year, it's quite hard to actually get a benchmark of your carbon footprint when you're such a complex, unbelievably complex event. You know, every single thing. I mean, you can imagine the number of moving parts. It's just incredible. So we have worked with an organisation called ILA, who are specialists in measuring the carbon footprint of complex things like this. So this year they've come and they're working on it. So they'll be able to at least tell us, okay, this is your benchmark. And we've got a vision to be the most sustainable event in the world, bar none.
That's awesome.
You know, that is our vision. So they're going to benchmark that for us. We already do a fair bit. You know, it was several years ago that we flipped from plastic bottles of water to absolute. And in fact, in 1 year, we reduced 300,000 bottles of water. Yeah. 1 year we had 300,000 bottles of water given out. The next year we had no water given out. Just fill up your reusable. So we're doing that. We work with a local recycling organisation called Green Bee, who in Cannes itself that recycles a lot of what we do. We offset all of our staff and all of our jury flights as well. So we're kind of building this picture really to try to become truly sustainable as an organisation and as an event. And we're also talking to other events as well, other big events as well. I had a meeting recently with Mobile World Congress, who are actually further down the line than we are. They do amazing things. So I think we can really learn from them. And as event organisers, we've definitely got a responsibility. The one final point I would say is that I think it's true to say, I don't think I'm kidding myself, I think it's true to say that maybe we save some flights as well, because everybody comes to Cannes at the same time. You can have multiple meetings, and maybe that is saving people doing individual flights to go and see their clients or their partners or whatever.
I think from my old network days, I can definitely say that's true.
Right.
Definitely.
Right. Yeah, good.
So the SDG Awards were started with the approval of the UNDP. Do you continue to work with them to improve the awards, to the design of how they're judged, and the whole evolution? How do you and the UNDP work together? Yeah,
we do. We work with them very closely. In fact, they always have a representative on the jury. So this year it's a guy called Rob Skinner. So they're there to represent the United Nations, and they help us to develop the categories, develop the language. And what they're there really to do, because it's quite a hard category to judge, because if you're a creative, you're like, wow, that's an amazing idea. But you need a balance of someone in the room who's talking about the actual issue, talking about the impact, talking about, okay, it may be a great idea, but what is it really doing for the actual problem we've got? So it's a nice balance to have. So without the UN, I don't think it would be anywhere near as powerful or impactful as it actually is.
Thank you. So a couple more questions. A UN report issued in 2022 paints a bleak picture of progress in achieving the goals. Climate change, hunger, the oceans. In fact, pretty much all 17 are underperforming relative to where we thought they would be at the half-time schedule point. So this hasn't been helped by COVID, Ukraine, other monumental external factors. With your very broad lens and aperture, what would you say to our industry that we can do? How can we make a difference? What are we, all of us, consultancies, networks, event leaders, clients, the whole group, to do something differently and be impactful? What would your advice to us be?
I mean, everybody from Bill Clinton to Kofi Annan to Ban Ki-moon, etc., come to Cannes and have been to Cannes to really say one thing, which is that you guys, the creative community, hold the key to change and to solutions, because that is what you do every single day.
Yeah.
So I think the industry that we've got, and obviously we were talking earlier on about how broad it's become, because you've got the creative people, but you've also got the platforms, the media, you've got specialists, you've got people like Deloitte, you've got all these unbelievable capabilities. And you do have to ask yourself, if we as an industry can't help, then who on earth can?
That's true.
So we, in some ways, we see our role, we're quite nicely neutral, and we see our role as a convener of the industry and a kind of the energy to collaborate. You know, we want to try to help people to collaborate. It's quite hard because this industry is so competitive. It's unbelievably competitive for reasons you can understand.
Very much.
But when you can bring people together behind a genuine cause, and that's what I would say to anybody that's watching this, you know, enter the SDG Lions. You know, the money doesn't come to the organization, as we've talked about. You might have the idea that can really make a difference. And the UN genuinely believe that as well. They really believe that we've got a part to play. So
I've worked with the UN, and their creative passion and energy is extraordinary. One little build on that, I think the creative industry is so excited by new. Once you've won a lion or you've got the work up, there should be second, third, fourth, fifth chapter before you move on. And I think you used the word before, it's about amplification and scale.
It's a really good point, actually, Nick, because I didn't mention, but actually one of the reasons that I personally think it's so important that we give the money is exactly that. Because one of the challenges we have, and one of the things that has sort of failed really with some of the initiatives we've done, is you've got a brilliant idea.
Yeah, that's it.
Just not enough. It's just not enough. You've got to have the media behind it. You've got to have the plan for amplification, as you say. So what we hope is that the funds that go to these ideas are used a lot for that as well. Because having an idea that's just out in the universe, just fizzling away, it's just, you might as well not have the idea in the first place.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know the potential. It doesn't become a behaviour change moment. Phil, is there anything you'd like to say to address the audience that you think would be important in this wonderful week that we're enjoying?
No, I think it's, well, firstly, thank you to the UN, thank you to Deloitte Digital for all your support, and just saying to anybody who's interested in this, put away your swords, put away your ammunition, your guns for a while, and reach across to your competitors and work together, because I honestly think we hold the key.
That's great advice. Absolute pleasure. Congratulations on what has already been an amazing week. I can't wait to Friday because I'm so excited to see what picks up. And that room is just, the energy is amazing. But congrats.
Thanks very much, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.
So say that again, sir?
What was the camera? It is my pleasure to introduce the next panel where we will dive into the importance of transparency and the evolution of sustainability. My name is Dominic Midori Davis, a senior reporter at TechCrunch, where I cover venture capital and startups. And it is my pleasure to introduce Sean Boyle, the founder of Unitmode, and Shweta Chakraborty, the U.S. CEO of We Don't Have Time. Please, before we begin, can you just elaborate a little bit more on what you do and your experience?
I'll let you start first, Seth.
Oh, we're doing the whole ladies first. Okay, fine. So, as CEO of North America for We Don't Have Time, my role is to support our headquarters, which is Stockholm, Sweden, in scaling our operations in the U.S. market and North America more broadly. We are bringing the science of communication to communicating science, and that's data on climate and using that data in a way that is going to help communities adapt and help policymakers ensure that there are policies in place that align to the realities of climate change, that are helping communities adapt to increased hurricanes, increased sea level rise, all the things we know that are coming with climate change. We also are supporting policymakers in putting legislation forward in addition to adapting for communities to adapt, also helping solutions to the climate crisis reach commercial viability. There's so much incredible work that's being done by nonprofits, by for-profits. There's so much ingenuity. And how do we ensure that those solutions really make it to market or are really picked up by communities that can benefit from them? So as a company and as the CEO of North America, I support our primary mission, which is communicating science and helping communities adapt to climate change and making sure it doesn't get any worse, mitigating against the worst case scenarios, and then specifically really focusing in on North America.
And I'm Sean Boyle. I'm the founder of Unitmode, actually co-founder. So we developed a SaaS platform that helps brands communicate responsibly. So our goal is to basically use for our tech to become the sense-making apparatus for advertising and communication that is geared towards climate, or that has climate content.
And the first question is for you, Shweta. How does transparency help drive behavioral change in individuals and organizations toward more sustainable actions?
Okay, I love that question because after I did my PhD in understanding the role of trust in why people change behaviors or don't change behaviors, I actually did a research project on transparency. And it was looking at, is more information actually better? So at the time, the FDA, right, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, was posting anytime there was an adverse event that was related to a new drug, right, a new prescription drug, they were posting it. So there would be tons and tons of reports coming in from all over the United States and around the world of different adverse signals associated with these drugs. And the research was around, is that better or worse? Is that actually helping people be more aligned to the reality of whether this prescription drug was helping them? And what we found is transparency isn't a magic bullet. It's good. It's necessary. It builds trust. It plays a key role. But more information isn't always better. So I always lead with that. As a behavioral scientist, I say that we need to have all of the tools in our toolkit to build trust, to be able to communicate science so that it resonates with people, so people are able to understand the reality of what's coming, so they can really secure themselves, their communities, their families, their futures. But ultimately, we need to be smart about all the tools we have in our toolkit. Transparency is one of them. Yes, transparency 100% improves the relationship between individuals and companies. That's important because companies are just these, entities. They don't have a face necessarily. So by showcasing data, sharing data, putting out actual carbon emissions, for example, as it relates to a company's transition to clean energy, that goes a long way in building public trust, and we need that. If we're going to overcome this climate crisis, we need trust. We really need people to believe that the solutions are going to impact them in the most positive ways. And so transparency plays a role in that.
And to follow up, from a marketing perspective, Sean, what role does transparency play in building trust and loyalty among consumers?
Well, I also love that question, and it's in part, this is why this is so relevant, right? Having this conversation when everything that is happening across the street is occurring right now. The reality is, previously I worked at Twitter and I worked at Facebook before that. So my understanding of the relationship of platforms that have that degree of consequence and that rely heavily on marketing is one of the key indicators that allowed me to sort of understand how incredibly influential it is and how important it is for that transparency to occur. What most of the people across the street are trying to aim is basically to connect with consumers, trying to get their consumers to really believe in the products that they're producing. And for that to happen, the authenticity is almost becoming a very de facto requirement. And transparency is an absolute necessity for that. And it's really, really important for that to be done responsibly. And that's one of the reasons why you're starting to see a lot of new emerging regulations and a lot of consumer trends that are basically pushing for an increase in that transparency and making sure that they undertake a very responsible approach in how they're communicating their products and their brands.
And this question is kind of for both of you, but from a behavioral science perspective, how can transparency be effectively communicated to the public to motivate sustainable behaviors? And are there strategies and tactics that have already shown to be effective?
So we need to be, sorry, jumping in.
Do please, yeah.
I'm such a nerd with this stuff, and I know you are too. We love talking about this stuff. So yes, this field is barely been applied. Advances in behavioral science, what we know about moving human behavior, what we know about transparency as a tool to really be able to communicate science and change. Ultimately, why are we communicating? We're communicating not just for information dissemination, we're communicating to change behavioral outcomes, to predict behavioral outcomes, and to align the public and policy and the realities of data, right? What we know about the planet warming, we need to align all of that. We need to close perception and reality gaps. Because right now, human beings and policymakers that represent their constituents, are overreacting to things that really shouldn't be taking up this much time and attention, and we're underreacting to things like sea level rise, right? It's a slow-moving, water. It's like watching paint dry. It's too slow to register in our minds as something that we need to be paying attention to. So all of this communication effort is to be able to close that perception gap, to better align and better calibrate humans, constituents, policymakers, ultimately. So all of that to say that transparency is part of it, and we need to self-report, and companies are doing that in the United States. They're self-reporting, but it's going to be a requirement now. You're going to have to showcase your data. It's happening. It's increasingly happening, and that's something that policy is demanding. But let's get ahead of that. We don't have to wait for regulation. We don't have to wait for government. Companies can start now, get ahead of the curve, because we know that communication builds that trust, increases that transparency, that increased transparency builds that trust, and ultimately will result in an aligned behavior, consumer behavior. If you are a company that's reporting your data, your consumers are going to trust you that much more and be that much more friendly and aligned to the business that you're doing, the service that you're providing. So it's a win-win-win all around.
And just only to add, because I'm also, full disclosure, I'm a big fan of We Don't Have Time, particularly because of their transparency efforts and what they're trying to do, I think is really fantastic. I love Steve Jobs' quote that says that the storytellers are the most powerful people in the world. Because of the significance of where we are today, with the most incredible creative minds across the roads, if we were to think about marketing almost as a product, the outcome of the products that they're actually producing as a result of that creativity is going to be consumed by the majority of the people on the planet, right, that are exposed to it. And there's an inherent responsibility for that to be done in a way that is really embodies that authenticity as a starting point, that it communicates things incredibly clearly, but also that they're super, super transparent, and they don't, there's no intentional or unintentional misleading of any of the products that they're actually, or the impact of the products that they're sharing.
Yeah. And I'm really interested, what are some emerging trends or innovations in the market that are currently enhancing transparency and sustainability efforts? And how can marketers kind of stay on top of these trends to continue effectively engaging with consumers?
We're going to hear about this in a little bit as well. From the founder of We Don't Have Time is recognized that there was a gap there. And so we need to use the technology that we have today to make it really easy to get to the bottom of how companies are doing. We know that companies are transitioning to clean energy. We know many are self-reporting. We know many are being forced to and will be forced to report their carbon emissions. If you look up any company, you can see their financial data right away. It's in the Google search. Why can't we see what their carbon emissions are? And so that is something that we very clearly need to close the gap on. And so the We Don't Have Time platform is evolving to be able to really quickly, at a glance, showcase data on the transition to clean energy companies from small to multinational. And so that's the trend. That's the direction we're going. We imagine that this is going to continue to grow because the market is going to be massive. There's so many companies that are already signed on to the UN Race to Zero, 7,000 plus and growing. And these are companies that recognize that they want to be seen as leaders in their various sectors. And then that's 7,000 out of, global marketplace. And so it's just going to increase from there. I think it's like 20,000 or 30,000 already that is beginning to take some action towards self-reporting, and it's predicted to be 50,000 plus next year. And so it's a market, and so we're going to see a lot more data transparency and companies supporting that transparency.
I think I'll add probably just 2 points to that. I think that was beautifully said. One of them is the trends of governments looking at or showcasing behavioral science studies that basically identify the importance of ensuring that even governments adopt approaches that will help accelerate their national objectives. One of them is, for instance, the House of Lords in the UK. They anticipate that 32% of households and decisions by consumers need to be changed in order to adapt to achieve the 2035 goals that the UK has established. So that is something that I think we're starting to see for the first time, and it's incredibly encouraging. The other one is basically consumer behaviors. I was the former head of sustainability at Twitter, and one of the interesting things and how I met my co-founder, who's a computational social scientist at Cambridge, it was basically by evaluating the trends and seeing how we could correlate the different demographics around what trends were basically surfacing, right? And it was just absolutely fascinating how decisions are being made now that even in a cost of living crisis, people are still wanting to make the really responsible decisions. And that is incredibly encouraging. And I have 3 kids myself, and I see them doing this quite regularly.
And that kind of goes into my next question, which is how can marketers effectively collaborate with stakeholders such as NGOs, industry associations, regulatory bodies to ensure transparency and credibility in their sustainability claims? And are there any successful examples of collaborations like that so far?
Yes, well, I mean, not to name drop, but I think what you're doing with We Don't Have Time, I think, is absolutely fantastic, and I think it's a good example of what's actually happening right now in an incredibly important event. Is something that I think is incredibly encouraging, and I think it's a really great example that many should definitely learn from. I do see a lot more collaboration, willingness to be open. The conversations that are being had between governments and NGOs is also increasing. It's not moving fast enough. There's a lot still that needs to be fulfilled. But I'm actually really interested to hear you talk about that particular question, because I think it's probably incredibly relevant to you.
Well, you're spot on, right? It's happening, and it has to happen. The transition is happening across society, across governments, across sectors. And this was kind of the laggard. The marketing community, the advertising community, the fashion communities, even though fashion really contributes to a significant portion of carbon emissions, have been behind, let's say, food and agriculture's attention to transitioning to clean energy, or transportation, right? We know that in the United States, we need to electrify transportation by 2035. So there was a lot of attention on that sector, less so. And it's interesting because the United Nations also doesn't necessarily give it the day of time that it would, like food and agriculture. So at COP28, is there going to be a full day on fashion the way there will be on transportation? So not necessarily. So it's not necessarily the sector itself's fault in any way. There's no finger pointing here. But all of these reasons are explaining why these sectors have talked about this more slowly than others. So the fact that we're here in Cannes Line is showing that, yes, it needs to happen more urgently, but it's happening, it's starting, which gives me a lot of optimism of where the conversation is going to be next year, how far different companies in advertising, in media, in marketing is part of every single sector, but the marketing community, how are they going to be reflecting on what's happened this past year? So this is very good. It's starting. It's starting in advertising. It's starting in media. I'll even say that the first ever Green Summit was hosted by Horizon Media in New York City. and that's very promising too. So we're seeing the move. We're seeing advertising move. We're seeing media move. The Global Fashion Agenda is hosting conversations on climate and sustainability in Copenhagen. So we're seeing fashion move. So I started by saying I was disappointed in some of these sectors that have been laggards in talking about the transition to clean energy, but at the same time, it's kicking off.
And just to sort of add to that, because I mean, you're spot on, and I actually, I wish this was a lot longer. Unfortunately, it's not. But we're starting to see also the emerging regulations as a result of ensuring that there's a standardization, things like the EU Green Claims Directive, and even at a more like holistic approach, all the things that are being done, all in Europe in particular, I think is really, really interesting. We're seeing it in the States with the FTC Green Guides, and in the UK, we're seeing a lot of the efforts around the Competition and Marketing Authority or the Advertising Standards Authority doing incredibly effective things, but they're doing it also with great dialogue and transparency, which I think has been quite encouraging.
And that actually goes into my next question, which for companies that are now going to start looking at being more sustainable and transparent, what are regulatory trends that they should be aware of, and how can compliance within these frameworks be integrated into their marketing strategies? Yes,
well, just kind of to expand on what I was discussing before, I think in terms of how companies are operating, we're seeing like in the EU, like the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive or the Due Diligence Directive, which is another one which is fantastic, which I know that Deloitte is all over, which I think is really, really exciting. We're seeing also the things around the Green Claims Directive, which is really trying to sort of stamp out greenwashing and trying to make sure that there's a standard on labeling around products that are being advertised, that they basically fall into particular categories that allow everybody to be able to understand the impact of and how they're engaging with those particular products. So it's really, it's exciting. I've seen also in the US, the FTC Green Guides is an incredibly encouraging move forward. It's still to be seen. I think by the end of the year, we're hoping to see something, but those are definitely steps in the right direction, and how those get sort of policed or how they end up being manifested at a regulatory landscape, well, it's still to be seen, but it's exciting. It's really, really exciting.
I'll add to that. I think he's covered it. But one additional thing is now having to report emissions, right? Being required to report emissions out of Europe and soon to be out of the United States is showcasing that regulation is no longer allowing what we refer to as green hushing. Mm-hmm. So this idea that you are transitioning, but you're not actually sharing that data with the public, that's almost as bad as greenwashing, because we're not expressing what's happening within a company across its value chain, and that will slow down the entire sector from moving forward, especially smaller companies that could look to the industry leaders in terms of overcoming some of the challenges in that transition to clean energy. So it's equally bad to not share that data, to not share the actions that are being taken, that are underway. So no more green hushing, and that's what these regulations are indicating, is that you need to be transparent. You need to put this information and data out so that others can also learn from it. That's important. It's for public awareness, but it's also how do companies accelerate? And then if you're sharing this sort of thing, it's helping your competitors, colleagues, but also competitors accelerate. And ultimately, there's no competition if the planet is warms past the tipping points, right? So we're in this together, and that's something we really have to remember.
And my last question is, for the businesses, maybe like big businesses, of course, but small businesses as well, everyone has different barriers when it comes to adopting transparency and sustainability. So what are some of these barriers that small to mid-sized businesses can anticipate, and how do we help them?
It's so timely. Yesterday I met a photographer, and somebody that's actually very active in production, absolutely very aligned with his values. And one of the things that he was mentioning was like, how do I want to make sure that I'm making the right choices when I'm actually entering into business with these. I'm very small. I'm not able to sort of foresee or really understand all of the details that I would want to know. So we're going to start to see, with all of these transparency efforts, with what's happening with the SEC and the CSRD in Europe and in the UK as well, that things are going to become a lot more transparent. I do foresee that there are going to be new platforms and content, including We Don't Have Time, that will be able to showcase how credible is that company actually? How are they first of all transparent, and second is, are they actually fulfilling on their credibly to their ambition targets, right? Like, do they have a short-term target, a long-term target, and are they actually very, very effective in pursuing their strategies?
I'm going to take a behavioral science nerdy response to this question, which is we need to remember that the public can stop all of these efforts in its tracks. If we don't think through how the public is receiving these various disclosures and efforts at transparency, then some of these innovations or some of these companies that are putting forward some really cool innovations are never going to see the light of day. So I'll give you an example. I was just listening this morning to a poll that was taken. This was on NPR. I know we're in France, but I was listening to New York, NPR. And a poll was taken on how the public feels about cellular agriculture, so meats grown in labs. And you would think the public would view, especially those that are investing in this space and those that are innovating in this space, they're so excited because you're no longer killing animals, and the final product you can't tell is the process, whether it was grown in a lab or whether it was from a slaughterhouse. So you would think the public would say, oh, it's better that it's not from killing an animal, but actually the polling is saying that 50% of those surveyed said they were grossed out by meat being created in a lab. There was an ick factor and they would not eat it or touch it. They much preferred an animal to be killed and that product ending up on their plate. So we need to remember that and get ahead of it. So companies could really benefit from doing the surveys, reaching out to the public, developing those relationships before releasing all of this data and all of this transparency, because what you don't want is the public to push back and be like, ew, I don't like that.
And it was a pleasure to have you both. Sadly, that is all we have time for today. After the short break, there will be a presentation by Ingmar Rensaat, CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time, where he will discuss creating impact and connecting emission data with financial data.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to now introduce this founder and CEO of We Don't Have Time, Ingmar Rensaat.
Thank you, Shata. It's actually my first time I'm here at Cannes, a place which I've noted is the place to be for doing businesses and party. We have a beautiful weather, people enjoying the ocean and the beaches, spectacular infinity pools, and the atmosphere bursting with creativity and energy. And already half into the festival, people are already making plans on what to do at next year's festival. Most people still think that nothing will change. We're partying like it's no tomorrow. That is unfortunately true. Not just for Cannes, but for the whole world. If we continue with business as usual, we all know what is going to happen. The weather will turn extreme, the beaches will disappear, and the food and wine will be scarce and taste shit. We all will be living in a dystopian world where people will start dying around us. The reason why we all are here is that we want to avoid that. And it gives me a lot of hope that the creativity community slowly understands their role is one of the most important in the fight against climate change. We have so many brilliant minds here that can sell any brand and create demand for people to want to buy new products, services, download that new app, wear that new clothes, whatever that makes business as usual thrive. The people here have the skills to do that. They can even sell sand in Sahara and people will buy it. imagine now if we could use that creativity, and the advertising industry will not just stop helping the fossil fuel industry, but will put their knowledge to use to get millions or billions to be active and act for the climate. And I'm not talking about getting people to start recycling or bicycle to work or buy that greener alternative. That is good, but it will only slow down the destruction. What I'm talking about is that we need to activate people. We need to get them active and start acting themselves by pushing the leaders, pushing the governments, and pushing the corporation to act on the climate. And I do believe that communication is a tool to get people active. That is how I'm become active. And this is what We Don't Have Time is all about. We have created a digital platform where you can communicate and push the leaders and the corporations. So when you see someone doing something great, you can go to wedon'thavetime.org and you can send them climate love. And that will get a lot of attention. So more people want to do that because people like to get encouragement and they're getting inspired by this climate love. But unfortunately, not everyone is doing great. Many corporations are still walking in the wrong direction. So you can also send them a climate warning. People don't like to get warned. People don't like to get negative attention, especially if you ask the people here at Cannes. They hate negative attention. So they will avoid negative attention. So we are a platform where we amplify what's good and what's bad. And if you're doing good, you get more clients, you get more business. If you're doing bad, you're losing business. And this changes things. And it's not us doing it. You can do this on our platform. So we empower everyone to have this power to push the agenda forward. And this really works. We are getting responses from everything from presidents, prime ministers, corporate leaders. They respond, defend themselves if they've been given climate warning, or they are thanking if they're giving climate love. And they're getting a lot of credit internally, so they get promoted and they can do more. We have already 300 global brands that they're not perfect, but they appreciate this feedback. They want to know how to become better and what they're good at. So they are actively using our platform to inform everyone about what they do. And if you don't like what they do, you can give them feedback on the platform. And a way to create waves with this, we're really pushing it on social media so that we reach millions of people and get them on board as well. But we're not stopping here, because now we're taking this to the next level. And we're calling that We Don't Have Time 2.0. And what we're going to focus on is something very important. And now we're sitting here at Deloitte, where Deloitte is part of this event. And Deloitte is doing a fantastic job helping companies with the financial numbers. We now need to take this to the next level, and I'm talking about the climate numbers. We need to focus on that as well, and that is the role We Don't Have Time is going to play. We are right now gathering all the sustainability reports that it's published all around the world. And we're extracting the emission number, the direct and indirect emission number. And we're dividing it with the revenues so that we can compare a small company with a large company. And we will have a sector average. And what we're going to do with this information is that we're going to publish it and give it away for free about all companies that are reporting it. And already today is about 20,000 companies worldwide that is giving out those numbers. But this will change, because now in Europe there will be a regulation that will make it mandatory to report their emission numbers, exactly as it's mandatory in all parts of the world to disclose the financial numbers. I mean, imagine how it would be if the financial market will not have any numbers. Should we just guess what kind of companies perform? No, we want the numbers. And the same thing with the climate numbers. We want to see how they're performing. And I think this will change everything. because the data today, this data exists out there, but it's not freely available. There's ESG data companies that are selling this information to professional analytics. That is very expensive. But our strategy is that we're going to publish those numbers on We Don't Have Time, and we're also going to push it and work with other platforms, such as Google, Apple, and CRM system, everyone that have an audience where people looking up companies. We want to share our numbers with them, so that when you look on a company, you will see if they perform on the climate or not. And our goal is to launch this at first version at the COP28 in December. And we are really looking for partners. Do you have an audience? Do you want those numbers on your platform? Let's contact us. Do you want to be part of this? Let's contact us and reach out, because we can't do this alone. But if we're many doing this, I think that this really can speed up change.
Well, you know I am very excited about all of this. It's been a pleasure working with you since we started several years ago now, and we've seen the evolution of this platform from really comms, entrenched in science, right? As a behavioral scientist, what attracted me to the We Don't Have Time platform is that we were really trying to move behavioral change and predict behavioral outcomes that align to the reality of what we're facing on a warming planet. And now we're evolving, and we're taking science again as the underlying factor here in making data transparent, because we know that's going to build trust and that's going to accelerate communities and solutions to adapting to the climate crisis, to mitigating against worse or warming scenarios. So talk to me a little bit about this evolution from where we were to where we're going, and why this data transparency is such a critical component of the success of overcoming this climate crisis.
Yes. So when I started We Don't Have Time 6 years ago, it was out of frustration that our world leaders were not acting on the problem and the public were not aware. And we suddenly saw that corporation leaders, they were actually understanding the problem more, and they were not. Many of them wanted to speak like, we're taking this really seriously. So we have a lot of CEOs of big corporations being on our platform, speaking like climate activists. And I think that has played a really important role, because if corporate people will listen to corporate people, right? And when they speak out, things are moving in the right direction. And also political system, they don't listen to people anymore, but they listen to the business, because business have the money.
Sure.
But now we're beyond this point where it's good if you speak up. We need also to do it.
Right.
And we have created a platform where we are rewarding those doing it and calling out those not doing it. But that is working, but it's not changing things fast enough. We need to do more, because it's good to call out those doing bad and those doing great. But what we really can judge today is what people are saying. If you're a leader, say that we're going to do this 5 years from now. We have this amazing target. That's great. But we can't just focus on that. We also must see, are they on track delivering that promise?
Right.
Because now every company have this net zero target, and they have those halving emission 2030, science-based target, everything. But we can't just celebrate that and applaud that without following it. Will they deliver on it? So that's where I see the emission numbers super critical, because now we have that numbers, and we can ask the corporation, great, you have this target, but why are you not decreasing your emission fast enough? You need to move faster.
Holding them accountable is key, right? And how is that going to impact the company's decision to do the right thing? Are we going to actually be able to, and we as We Don't Have Time, but we as a larger climate community, how do we convince the private sector to really to accelerate their solutions? Because ultimately, will they be motivated maybe by economic consequences?
For once, it's not just voluntarily anymore. So everyone will need to report a number. And if you have set this goal to become great in the future, you must deliver on it. So by publishing those numbers, we will have those companies setting the goal accountable for their action this year. And they can't hide like, yeah, we will fix that 3 years from now. They need to be focusing on this year. Exactly as a stock market. I mean, it's great if CEOs say that next year we will have record sales. And all the analytical people, they say, yeah, okay, fine, great. But what about this quarter's numbers? Are you going to make it? We don't think that. We think you need to adjust the goal here. I mean, it's better to have a realistic target that companies deliver on than a fantasy that no one is what they're not going to reach. But I think the biggest impact with this is that it's not like we're pressuring the companies. Many companies want this transparency because the big companies, they all have suppliers. And the large companies, they often have very, very serious climate targets. But the only way they can succeed with that is if all their suppliers also are doing the same journey.
Right.
And by making all this information free, we will create a marketplace where they can see who is actually performing or not.
Well, this is really exciting. Stay tuned and see where this all goes. But the idea is holding companies accountable and the public really saying, okay, we like what you're doing. Yeah. And that's then reflected in their stock as well. So that's exciting. That's an exciting future that aligns the economy to a sustainable planet. So thank you for kicking off this critical conversation.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We are back here at the SDG Lounge with a very, very interesting panel of illustrious people that are all, again, very close friends of mine, bizarrely enough. We have with us Jakob Trollback from the New Division. Jakob is he's famous for designing that logo that you keep seeing of the SDGs and the SDG icons in way back in 2015. Me and Jakob worked on that together. We have with us Stephen Keppel, who is the president of our partner, the Public Foundation. Welcome. And we have with us Nadia Taranchevsky.
Close
One
enough.
day I will get this right. who is the founder of Conscious You and is also a coach to C-level executives across the world. What we're doing today is we're going to look at the inner growth for the greater good. What do we need to do as human beings to take our own inner journey for us to be able to really kind of tackle the very, very large looming problems that we face out in the outside world? To do that, we believe that we need to also take care of ourselves, look into ourselves, and take that inner journey. I'll start with you, Jakob. You've developed, after you developed the Sustainable Development Goals and made them the short form of them, and every one, the amazing work that you did, you're working on a new product now that's called the Inner Development Goals. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting initiative. We had been working first with the 17 goals, and then we did all the 169 targets. And we were thinking that, okay, here are the tools now. Now we're going to see some real change, because now we all of a sudden have a better way to understand the challenges. And still, not that much happened. And we started to talk to people who were working with inner development in different forms, and said, why couldn't we have some goals for ourselves, some guidelines? And I think that the observation you have to do in all cases is like you have to find the driving forces. It's like if you're looking at business, you know that investments are going to be the driving forces. And how do we invest in ourselves? How do we make sure that we that we have the motivation to go forward? And I think that with all the challenges we have with the SDGs, it's a very good exercise to think about what is holding us back in this. What are the things that we could be getting better at? So that was the whole idea behind the IDGs, and it's a communication project actually, like what we're doing a lot. So we have gathered a lot of information and done a lot of research and surveys to get an answer to the question, what capacities do we need in order to solve these problems? And so then we get a lot of feedback, and we sort of arrange this into a system, into a framework that we all can work with.
That's fascinating. Nadia, I'll come to you next. You've founded a platform called Conscious You that really kind of thinks about how we can help big corporations to have some kind of inwards journey for employees, for C-suites. Can you tell us a little bit more about the platform?
Yeah, so the general idea, building on what Jakob just said, is we know that we have a global issue, right? We know what the problem is. We also are quite clear about what the solutions are, what the behavioral solutions are, also what the technological solutions are, and there is no movement, right? So from my perspective, we don't really have a technical challenge we're facing. We have a consciousness challenge. And I feel that corporations are a wonderful lever to raise consciousness on the planet, because you have these bubbles of people who have to work together and to achieve something together. So you have them across different demographics. So it's a wonderful lever for all of these people to shift together. And what we do at Conscious You is we looked at how do you scale that? So instead of just taking along the C-suite, which is great work and needed, but we need actually a movement in an organization. And the way we do it is by combining individual consciousness development that is platform-based, right? So where people learn with micro-learning units and do their sort of self-education, but we combine it with action learning in teams to increase social cohesion, but also to increase commitment. Because at the end of the day, I also feel consciousness development is amazing, but where the rubber hits the road is, do the people that you deal with in your everyday life, do they see you change? So that's what we do.
Stephen, hearing Nadia and Jakob, what's been your experience? How do you reflect on that need for that inner journey?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm really attracted to this concept and this conversation. I've been working in global development in some fashion for the past 20 years. And if I think about where I started in this journey, I go back to probably the first, let's call it development project, impact project I worked on, which is in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, an education initiative at a school there. And I went as kind of a young kid out of college, grew up in a pretty comfortable life in America, and being faced with, and it was a very difficult time for Haiti at that moment, being face to face with extreme poverty, violence, instability, I quickly realized I needed, I didn't really have the skills, kind of these inner, we know now is like inner development, to handle a lot of this. So if this was, I either had a choice, I could just be like, I'm out, this is the fear, the insecurity, I'm just going to try to ignore it and go back to a comfortable life, or I need to find a way to stick with it, and not just get through it, but also be personally strong and developed in a way where I can be part of the solution, right, and create an impact. And I realized quickly that I couldn't be effective. In this case, I was a teacher and an education administrator if I didn't develop these skills. So it didn't happen overnight, but that was kind of the beginning of the journey for me, that I needed something more than just, kind of intellect around certain concepts or policies or ideas, but I needed to start on my own kind of, whether it's mental health or mindfulness, and to be present every day and to show up. And that's something that's guided me, since then.
Thank you. Jakob, I want to kind of focus a little bit on the substance of the inner development goals. there's certain skills that you've developed that you believe can lead people on a certain journey inward, and then that journey can help us with a greater good. Can you walk us through a little bit of it? I'm sorry we can't show the slide, but can you walk us a little bit through that architecture?
Yeah, we got, as I said, a lot of answers on skills and capacities and qualities that were good to have to cause change. And so what we did was that we found a way to structure them into 5 different dimensions. And the first dimension starts with being, so that's about like who we are. It has things like inner compass and like just knowing where you are, being authentic and having integrity, those things. And then the next dimension is called thinking, so that's cognitive skills. And there's a lot of things there, obviously, that is very tightly connected to the practical challenges we have. It has critical thinking, perspective skills, sense making, like how can you really kind of figure this out. And then the third category is in many ways maybe the most interesting one, because that's how we relate to each other and to the world around us. So there we have appreciation, humility, and etc. Like so that we find our place and we learn how to relate to the world around it. And then the 2 last dimensions are, in a sense, because the 4th category that is about communication. How do we create this action together? So there we have co-creation skills, we have intercultural competences, we have trust, obviously like really high on this. And then the 5th category is how do we create action? So there we have optimism and perseverance and creativity and stuff. So the interesting thing to me is that there are some of the skills that are like real superpowers, I think you can say. Like trust is a superpower, optimism is a superpower. It's like the things that we know that we need to move forward. But in any situation, you can sort of build a molecule out of these atoms. So you can say, to solve this thing, we need to be better at critical thinking. We need to be better at humility. We need to be better at sense making, or what it is. And so it's a very interesting system to do an analysis of what's holding us back. And that is as individuals, as small groups, as corporations, as organizations. So it's really, I look at it a lot as sort of a troubleshooting chart.
That's a very nice way of looking at it. Nadia, we're here at the Cannes Lions. You've been walking around. You've seen the beast,
the madness,
the beast, the beauty. Some people would wonder why we are talking about the inner development goals. Should we be concentrating on sales? Should we be concentrating on profit, on advertisement, or on the greater good through advertisement? What is it about this inner journey that's so important in order for us to achieve other things? Can you dwell a little bit into that?
Yeah, so, from my perspective, and I do have different voices in me. So my more cynical voice, when I hear people talk about growth and profit, and even in the social sustainable investment space, right, we still talk about the bottom line. And my inner cynic says, what is your return on investment when the world is going to burn? Right? Because if everything collapses, then the return on investment is poof, is gone. So why do we not invest the time that we have left, which is not a lot, in shifting something collectively forward? And I think one of the big building blocks actually in our work that I feel is underrepresented is, for example, a pivotal relationship that we have in our life with money. And we see this here a lot. There's so much affluence here, there's so much luxury here, and we all deal with money every day, but it's hardly ever talked about. We don't reflect on our relationship with money. And I think it's essential, right? Because collectively we have a preoccupation, if not even to say an addiction to money. Everything is oriented and optimized towards growth and maximizing our financial returns. So there's something about the inner in a growth piece that I feel that is actually not included in the IDGs yet. I would love to see that, right, as the money piece, so that we can get to a place where we understand that our relationship to money could actually show us something about what we still need to take care of in our own self-growth journey. You know, and I'd love to talk more about this, but maybe we'll leave it at this for now.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, can this really move the needle on sustainability from your perspective? You've seen a lot of this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as I became more aware of this as a format and structure, I see it as, in many ways, a missing link, right? Public Foundation, we work with different partners and leaders and activists around the world who are fighting against, to combat climate change or to end poverty. But we need like 10x that group and that movement. And I think a lot about what are some of the barriers to increasing the size of this movement of people working for good. And I think a big part of it is this inner development, because it's almost, whether you're working in, fighting for sustainability already, it's important because we need you to be kind of mentally healthy and physically healthy and to stick with it through the long haul. And if you're outside of the movement, if you're not aware, you're not that engaged, I think these inner development goals, or just in general inner development, the path to mindfulness, the path to action, how do you get to action? I think you need these tools and these skills. So I think it's definitely something that's missing currently. And I do believe if more people take this approach and develop some of these skills, it can make a real change.
Thank you. Jakob, what's your intent with the inner development goals? What do you want to happen? Where do you want them to live? Who do you want to use them? What's the future?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, but there has been tremendous excitement for it. We have hubs growing everywhere, and we have now already hundreds of hubs around the world who's helping us to work to develop this system and spreading the whole idea of maybe we need to look in and see what is. I mean, you're talking a lot about what's holding us back, like to find those things out. And the interesting thing is that we could, as soon as we started to talk about it, it took fire because there's such a need for something. People are, because it's like, if we're going to talk about money, the problem with money is of course that it has for such a long time been the only way that we measure our progress. And then you ask a person, would you pick being rich or being happy? And that's not a question. That's not a hard choice for anybody. But at the same time, I know that there are happiness indexes and stuff, but it's not what drives us forward. So I think that maybe also because of the pandemic and people had so much time to reflect on their lives, it seems like that there is an increased awareness, and we hope that this is going to be a good tool for people to think more about just what can you do to better the way you relate to yourself, to life, in a sense. Because when you look at all of these, it's 23, 24 skills right now. It's like there's not a single one that you would be like, nah, I don't need that. They're all things like, yeah, I want to be better at that. I want to be great at this.
Yeah, so you created a new bottom line in a way, right? So to measure success in a different way, because I also deeply believe when an organization that moves towards the IDGs, that has that as a goal in mind, there are other benefits that come from that, right? So there will be more productivity, there will be less friction because of interpersonal differences, less silo thinking, all of the things that slow organizations down and make them not work will be reduced. So, one could also argue it might make you financially more successful, but there is actually a deeper drive there. There's something much more meaningful about what it means to be a human being in this world today when you connect to the IDGs. And that would be a wonderful bottom line to have, to say, what if we achieved that?
But we talked about this yesterday also, that in a way, right, when you're talking about another dimensions, if you're going to talk about morality and ethics, it's like we have pretty, the way that we've been looking at that with different commandments and different things that has been lifted by religion, they're very crude, these moral guide things, and they're not really applicable when you have the complexity of societies today. And this is more sort of finding okay, what do we need? What are the levers to make things work better in a group, and also for your life to work better, and in leadership also. And so in a way you could, we're joking about that we sort of should build a secular religion around this, because it's something that can better your life, can better your relationship, and can better our relationships with the planet, and so we can look at what we have with love and appreciation, instead of saying that, okay, let's just cut down this forest because we make money on the wood.
But it's such an interesting thought process to think about, that we've developed a system through religion, through bizarre moral ideas that people had thousands and thousands of years ago. If we could go back in time with my famous time machine and give them the IDGs, what a difference that would have made. If the forefathers of our crazy religions and our moral codes could have then have themselves, imagine, Martin Luther having the inner development goals and thinking about that, rather than thinking about, only the sacrifice to God that needs to be made. It would have been a huge difference to our planet, not only to society, but to our planet.
I think in a sense that those moral guidelines was there to kind of rein in the reptilian brain, the primitive instincts. But if we're going to develop, the frontal lobe now, we need to fire that up with new.
We should go further.
Yeah,
we need to do better.
Yeah.
And and Stephen, since you work in the space of foundations, right? I'm sure you've been in more rooms than me where everything is amazing, right? And people have visions and they have purpose, and they talk about things that matter, like diversity and mental health and sustainability. And then suddenly money's on the table and all of that is just gone, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we get to an internal place where these things really truly begin to matter, because they do. And we cannot measure that just in money anymore.
Sure. And sometimes you're in these rooms and everybody is on the same page, and you forget for a minute that actually we need to connect with the millions of other people that are out there that are looking for answers, that are looking for solutions to deal with the climate crisis and other things, and are choosing either kind of ignoring ignorance or fear, or get action. But action can seem really hard because there's a lot of steps that get you there. And what I like about the inner development goals in this process of inner development is it's like a toolkit. It's like, hey, as you mentioned, trust, humility, communication, a lot of things that lead up to action. You can't start on day zero and just say, great, I'm going to save the world. It's like you need to focus on yourself first. We've talked a little bit about selfish and selfless. You need to figure yourself out before you can be a real change maker in the world. So I think this is a great way to get started on that. And
do you think, Nadia, that the platform that you created really touches on that and can really scale it?
Yeah, that's, I've been thinking about this for 10 years, and we've been prototyping and, running pilots, and what we can see is that it does exactly that. It pays into what you guys developed with the inner development goals, right? And the wonderful thing is that we realized it's not rocket science, because people, we have such a deep need to connect to ourselves and to feel ourselves and to connect to other people, that if somebody gives us the space to do that in a structured way, people fall into that very, very quickly and with a lot of joy. And I do feel, if we're also talking about the, unleashing the human potential, that's the place we need to get people to. And, and I'm not saying that conscious use is the only way to get there, but there aren't that many of us right now that can actually scale it. Because I myself used to work in leadership development and work a lot with C-suite people, and we had these amazing workshops for 3 days, 5 days. But at the end of the day, how do you get it to everybody? Because you need to reach a tipping point with this kind of work, and we need to do this globally much, much quicker than we have.
We're almost at the end of our discussion, which I wish could go on for a long time, but maybe we'll continue later outside of cameras. Call to action, Stephen, very short.
Yeah, I would say, obviously think about what you can do to save the planet and your community, but start with yourself. Think about what you can do for yourself first and get in a good place, and then go change the world.
Jakob?
Well, I think a lot about equations. I think about, the oldest equations we have on the planet are the ecological systems, and we're a result of that. So, we need to save the planet, but it's actually ourselves that we need to save, because we're just inflicting pain on this system, this equation that we're a result of, and we should treat it with the compassion and with awesomeness. I mean, we need.
You use some of the skills in the development goals.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's time to be part of this, to not fight against it, to appreciate your environment, appreciate what we can get from other human beings, from living things, from animals, from dogs, and from the nature and from trees and the water. It's like something that I don't know why we just. I mean, the money thing you're talking about, that's and our strive to get status and power. That is very primitive force, but it's not a primitive force. It's not a force that makes us happy. So let's be part of this planet.
Better.
Yeah.
Quickly, what's your call to action?
Well, I want to quote somebody who I recently saw on another panel. Her name is Miki Kashtan, and she's a seminal thinker. And one of the things she talked about was that she said, within extractive capitalism, what we have fallen prey to is it actually starts with self-exploitation, right? And how often and how frequently do all of us work beyond capacity, right? So in essence, we can't feel ourselves anymore. So we self-exploit, we go beyond capacity. When I can't feel me, I cannot feel you. And I also don't have an issue exploiting you, frankly. And if I can't feel me, can't feel you, I cannot feel the planet, right? So a simple thing that we can do every day is to look at where am I going beyond capacity, or how can I be within capacity and support people in my environment to do the same.
Great thought to end with.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's all take that to heart and take it with us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both.
We'll hopefully continue the conversation.
Lovely.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both.
Nice socks.
Oh, I think we're on. We're back. Hello. There you go. Live TV. Hello, and welcome back to the next session at the SDG. I can't even say it. SDG Lounge at Cannes Lions. So my name is Andy Sandoz. I'm the Global Chief Creative Officer at Deloitte Digital, and it is my pleasure to be sat here today with AJ Coyne, who, AJ, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to the audience out there rather than me do a bad job for you.
No, not at all. Thank you. As you said, I'm AJ Coyne. I work at Klarna, where I head up marketing and run all of our 25 markets.
Super. Well, welcome. We are going to talk about creativity and creative ideas and purpose for the next 10, 15 minutes, really. So the place we want to start is you were involved in an initiative some time back out of Australia that was called the Lion's Share. Yep. So can you tell us about the origin of that, what brought it together, and then talk a bit about the idea itself?
Of course. I mean, it's such an incredible idea, and I'm so grateful to have been part of it. It starts with a truth, right? A truth about advertising. And the truth is that we see ads every day. We're inundated with adverts. They feature cartoons, humans, animals, everything. And the interesting thing, or the insight that a friend of mine in Australia, Chris, had, sat on a sofa, probably like this, while he was watching ads, was we pay human beings to be in adverts, right? Like, it's called talent fees, it's usage, and then, you know, the more that advert gets shown in more markets, more time, the more that human makes. At the same time, you know, animals feature in, I think it's close to a third of all of advertising. That can be in the form of a logo, that can be in the form of like on screen, yet they don't get paid anything. And they're, you know, more effective, with the exception of babies, than humans in selling products, right? It's why we use them.
I think the data probably backs that up,
Yeah,
I would have thought.
correct. And you know, at the same time, we've wiped out so many species over the last few decades, and they're in dire need of our help. So it really started with that wouldn't it be great if we could pay animals like we pay humans to...
It's such a no-brainer when you say it, isn't it? It's like, oh my God, of course. Yeah, what a great way to support.
Exactly, and I think the testament to how to that is it's everyone gets it straight away, and it's why haven't we done this before? Yeah. So that's sort of where it started, and then Chris and Rob Glutzo, they came up with the idea. They started to package it together. I was
and what was it called?
The Lion's Share.
The Lion's Share.
Yeah. So I was working at an advertising agency in Australia at the time, and I headed up the Mars business there. And Mars are, you know, we know them for Snickers bars and M&Ms, but they also have a massive pet care business and are hugely passionate about animals. And so I got involved from that reason perspective to try and help craft the idea. We ultimately, you know, knocked on the UN store, and they got as excited as anyone does when you tell them this idea. And it's, you know, if you think about the potential value in it, it's tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds that can be made if we just started to do this, if just 10% of brands could do it. And so once the UN were on board, it was then our duty to get Mars to be the first signature client, which they were.
So you had the idea, and then you started to pull the ecosystem around the idea that could make it work.
Yeah, exactly. And without the UN, there was no credibility behind it. Who's going to get behind a fund without having the UNDP involved? Because ultimately, if you're asking the private sector and brands to donate money, you want to know it's going to a credible organisation that can actually spend that wisely.
Give it some depth and some resonance.
Correct. And Mars were like, I think they said yes in the room. They were so excited by this, like, and testament to them being that first signature. And we announced it here in Cannes. I can't remember my years now, but it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, with Sir David Attenborough, who is obviously incredible for many reasons. He recorded our announcement film, and it was a rallying cry to every brand out there to join. And that obviously did very well. We were lucky enough to have many, many brands join, not just Mars. We had Gucci, JC.Co, anyone that sort of saw that content or spoke to the team at the UN or anyone at Mars was instantly on board. And so, you know, we're able to raise tens of millions of dollars in the first year. And we entered it into this SDG Lions the year after, a year in, and it won the Grand Prix. And
I think we should pause and say congratulations there, shouldn't we?
Thank you. I mean, many, many people involved. But
lots of animals.
Yeah. And lots of animals, and I think Sir David Attenborough had a big role to play in terms of like getting that cut through. But the great thing about that I don't think is actually talked about enough is that all of the entry fees for that category go to the Grand Prix winner. So they get donated back to that fund. So we were able to take that money and then reinvest in the Lion's Share.
Next wave,
Yeah, correct.
And where did it go from there then?
So, I mean, I worked while I was in Australia on it very, very passionately and supported and volunteered my time. And it's, you know, till this day still managed by, you know, the UNDP and team.
So let's. I mean, for you, that was a voluntary thing that you leaned into.
Correct.
So what is it that you saw for you and that you saw for your future and the way that you want to work? Why did it capture you and that initiative was so meaningful for you to volunteer your effort?
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone, I think everyone probably is a good citizen and cares about the planet, but when something is so like clearly wrong, and it just felt like a misjust issue that people were like profiting from the image of animals and loving animals, right? But weren't giving back. And it's like, if you're going to slap a crocodile on a shirt, or I'm not like anything, then why wouldn't you want to help that species? So for me, it was a no-brainer, and I love creative ideas. Equally, I believe that everyone should do their part to have a positive legacy in the planet and leave it better than ideally we found it, which we're not doing a great job on yet. But I think having passion to try that
is
super important.
That potency of a great idea that hooks you.
Yep.
Immediately you get it and go, wow, that's so obvious. We should absolutely do that.
Yep.
It's a commercial idea.
Correct.
It really is driving change, growth, finance, opportunity, and it's a purposeful idea. So it really is a nice little kind of mix of things for anyone in the industry to get into.
100%. And I think with obviously the UNDP's involvement, it also then has the impact. So there's a lot of great work. And sometimes there's always like the so what? What's the action? Let me see how that's actually delivered in terms of business results. And this is like one of those cases where you can actually see it improved. The organizations that were involved, their staff were super engaged, and then ultimately they had stories to tell about how this money was being spent and the great work that the Lions Share was doing all around the world.
Yeah, I mean, a great idea writes, doesn't it?
Correct.
It just creates and creates and creates, and everyone can find their way into it, and it runs. It's how you judge it. So you use the word impact there, which is a really good segue. So we can say, for you then, how impactful was this on your career? Obviously, you're at Klarna now, so a great brand doing great things and really interesting things, some wonderful campaigns and stuff.
Yeah.
How has that experience of the Lions Share working that way influence the work that you do today, the business you're in, and
so,
where that's going?
So, I mean, I work at Klarna. Klarna is one of the largest global retail banks, payments and shopping services. We have 150 million users, 500,000 merchants all around the world, and we're operating in 25 markets. And I think ultimately, as a company of that size, we have a responsibility to be good citizens and to give back. And when I was, looking for to move back to the UK from Australia, they were looking for at that time a head of marketing in the UK, but they were also very much early on their journey in terms of what can they do in this space. And so I was able to not only come in and look at the UK market initially, but also like help put the building blocks together with the team there to look at what should the strategy be from a sustainability perspective.
So you were in early enough to influence
the
thinking prior to any ideas that came, to look at like really what do we need ideas to do.
Exactly. And today, like, I think it's a combination of things. Like, we want to make sure that we are using, so our app has lots of users all around the world. How can we ensure that we're educating them? So on Klarna, we have lots of transactions every day. If you have used us to buy any website, that data is stored in the app, and it can click on a product and you can go in there and it will educate you on the carbon footprint of that product. It will tell you exactly, regardless of what retailer it is, the impact that purchases have made on the planet. Will equally actively promote sustainable products in there to make sure that you're making informed choices as you shop and pay online. And equally, we're a private company. We have funding rounds, and one of the biggest commitments, and I think the most amazing statements our founder and the exec made, was every time we do a funding round, we donate 1% of that into a planet fund, and that gets then dispersed to great initiatives all around the world. And that's something we've done for the last, I think, 2 to 3 years, and we'll continue to do. And I think as of a couple of weeks ago, we now also offer that to our consumers in a way that they can also do top-ups when they pay and give back to the planet as well.
Right, so you put the agency back into the consumer,
exactly.
where they want to spread the love. So again, that same potency really of a great idea, beautifully executed thinking and creativity with commercial intent right at the heart of it, but then that purposeful, meaningful factor
100%
baked right in. One thing you mentioned Mr. Attenborough, or Sir Attenborough, I think, David Attenborough, and that use of celebrity. I think in all of this, and when you're working so purposely, you still need to entertain. Like, we are an entertainer, we still need to push messages out, we still need to capture attention.
Yes.
And so I think bringing David Attenborough to life is a no-brainer when you say it, and he will obviously do that. How have you carried on to use celebrity alongside these purposeful messages, or how have they engaged with those purposeful messages as well when you've worked with with those? Because I know that you've done a lot with
Yeah.
some really interesting people.
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky at Klarna to have worked with everyone from Snoop Dogg, Lady Gaga, A$AP Rocky, most recently Paris Hilton, and really, I guess the strategy behind why we work with celebrities at Klarna is because people are inundated with messages every day, whether it be advertising, whether it be social media, and cutting through is super difficult. And we live in a world where attention is currency, and so the reason why we work with these celebrities is can we get the internet to turn its head to our brand for a moment, for as long as it allows, whether that's a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes, or a day or two. And so the role of them is very much focused on like Klarna and delivering our message. That being said, when we engage with these partners, since we launched the Give One Fund as well, we also offer that to them, so they can also join that. So when we're talking about their fee, they have a % that can go to the fund, and they can also pick where they want to invest that money in terms of an initiative that makes sense for them, and how they want to spread that.
So do you find that this approach to creativity and problem solving and sort of the richness of it helps you attract the celebrity and helps the celebrity engage and helps you get the people you really want for your message? Because obviously they get a lot of people approaching them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it definitely helps that that we are educating on all of these issues and acting with the carbon footprint on every product you make, and even as recently launching, in terms of the circular economy, a resale button. So obviously that trend is only growing with lots of organizations around the world. But obviously, if you're buying things, we are trying to encourage you to also automatically resell it as well. So when you're ready to buy something else, you can click resell, and it's live in the Nordics at the moment, but it will essentially open up a local provider. It will upload the image of that product and allow you to resell it. And that's something that a lot of the celebrities we speak to are super impressed by.
So you keep the products they're buying, keep in the circle. You want something new, you can sell something old.
Correct.
Someone else gets something new, and the circle works. And that's live now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and so live in the Nordics at the moment, and due to go live in the US and I think the UK very soon.
Yeah, that's super. So then, clearly a meaningful thing for you. I think we've got about a minute left. Okay. So I know it because they just flashed up a one screen. So like if there's no secret sense in mind. So I think just then quickly, really, what does it then mean to you and to others? What would you say to other creatives out there thinking of working this way and making it? Because I think we're all looking at purpose, but really snap. What would you say to them about doing this? Surely it makes everything better.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. I think do it for the right reasons. If you're doing it to, win an award, that's probably the wrong starting point. But if you're doing it because you genuinely believe in a cause and you believe in doing good by the planet, and essentially leaving it in a better place than we found it, then I think go all in and invest your time. And you're probably going to get 1,000 no's before you get one yes, but that's fine. Keep cracking on. And, I had a kid last year. She just turned 1, and I passionately believe that we work in marketing, which is great. I'm private sector, but finding things that can you can be proud of, but you can say that you did something to help. And I think find that and jump at it, and don't take no for an answer.
Yeah, great advice. I think that resilience piece as well in the middle, you pursue it and you fight for it, and you make it happen. I mean, I've now no idea, where someone's going to go and tell us that we're obviously absolute professionals at the interviewing on live camera, so everyone's still listening to us. So I think we're pretty much there, and I've no idea if someone's going to walk into the room.
Cool.
So I'm now completely spitballing with you, AJ.
Perfect. Well, you're doing a very good job of it. Where are your socks from?
My socks are from my daughter. There we go. And we're cutting, and we're off. Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, so glad to be back. My name is Dominic Midori Davis, senior reporter at TechCrunch, and I am so happy to be moderating this panel today, highlighting a great climate action campaign called Don't Choose Extinction. Now into its second year, it's the most impactful campaign the United Nations Development Program has ongoing, alongside many partners. Let's reflect on its success and dive a bit more into how this campaign came to be and how it's evolving since it was created almost 2 years ago. Now, Nick Garrett, the global leader of marketing and communications at Deloitte Digital, will be joining us in a moment. But until then, we will go ahead and get started. Would you like to introduce yourself and your involvement?
Absolutely. My name is Boaz Paldi. I'm the Chief Creative Officer for the United Nations Development Program, and I'm the overall lead for the Don't Choose Extinction campaign.
Great. Yeah, and I'm Stephen Keppel, president of PVBLIC Foundation. PVBLIC is a nonprofit organization that thinks a lot about how do we use media, data, and technology to advance action on sustainable development and specifically the SDGs. In this case, for this amazing campaign, PVBLIC played a role of helping Boaz and the team get to launch and to think about, you know, they have this amazing creative concept, which you'll see, but how do you make sure the world is seeing that, whether that's on out-of-home advertisements or TV and radio, and so we helped through our network, you know, create an advertising campaign that ended up garnering around $30 million in ad value around the U.S. and around the world. So that was, yeah, and been a big part of it in the evolution that we'll talk about as we go forward.
Yes. Now, Boaz, the campaign is now 1.5 years old. 2.2 billion people have watched the hero film with Brinky the Dino. How did this all come about?
So I got quite a difficult brief from my senior management. They wanted me to talk about a dense, complicated issue, and that was fossil fuel subsidy reform. The world governments are spending an enormous amount of funding on fossil fuel subsidies. Those fossil fuel subsidies benefit almost no one except for the fossil fuel industry itself. 80% of those subsidies goes directly to manufacturers. That's the 11 big companies that manufacture fossil fuels. And last year, we were at about $423 billion. This year, we are going to be at about $700 billion because of the war in Ukraine. That's $700 billion of negative impact on the planet. But it took me now like about 2 minutes to explain it to you. We needed to get a very, very easy, fast way of talking about this issue that will resonate with the public, that will be easily understood and easily accessible, and that's where the campaign was born. I think we can see it, and then we can perhaps to understand what we were trying to do.
Yes, and right before we go to the video, I just want to give Nick a moment to introduce himself and the work with the campaign.
Hi there. I'm Nick Garrett. I'm the current marketing and commerce lead globally at Deloitte, but before that I was a strategy and creative consultant and partnered with Boaz on a few projects, but this one is of particular importance and pride for us both.
All right, now let's have a look at the video for those who might not be familiar with the campaign.
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Okay. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
My first question is, of course, who was the voice of the dinosaur?
Jack Black.
Jack Black. Oh my goodness. That's so cool. Why do you think this campaign was such a success? To anyone who wants to answer. Nick?
I think there's a couple of reasons. And sometimes the most obvious but wonderful idea is almost staring you in the face, and you kick yourself because it's so obvious, and you go, how did I not think that that would be there? So beautiful copywriting, wonderful storytelling, the amazing visuals. But it was it's just a very simple message, said in a non-alarmist way, done in a way that can get into pop culture. And it was just a nice behavior change flip. So it had, that storytelling is key, but it was an ability to get an important message across, but in a poignant and charming way. And it resonated because it was non-threatening.
And so what is next for the campaign, and how do you see it evolving, Boaz?
So I think, we've had a great run with the campaign. As you said, billions of people across the world have watched the film. Frankie the Dino himself, he's a little CGI guy over here, but he's become a climate activist. He's become a call to action. That call to action of don't choose extinction has become a call to action for the entire climate movement. We've managed to insert fossil fuel subsidy reform onto the COP negotiation agenda. We've managed to activate in many, many places. And so we see this continuing. We see a kind of like a possibility for Frankie the Dino to continue being that avatar for climate action in this very, very critical time, and continuing that journey of really trying to promote the idea that we all have to take urgent action. So that's what I would like to see. I think we've had a huge success with it, and I think we are on the right track to make it happen.
And what has been the differing reaction or responses from, consumers or just regular people watching it versus maybe governments and businesses who to the campaign?
It's a very, very, very overall. We've had an absolutely incredible response. We were worried about what countries, with the United Nations, we're a little bit political, we're a little bit risk averse. So we had a heat map of where the issue of fossil fuel subsidy reform specifically was a hot topic, and that could flare up negative thoughts about the UN, negative actions against the UN. And in all of those places, exactly the opposite happened. The campaign went viral. It went viral in Brazil, which we thought would be a problem. It went viral in China, where we thought it might be a problem. It went viral in Russia, where we thought it might be a problem. In fact, we have a very, very kind of political structure, and we have a thing called the executive board of UNT that is member states, countries tell us basically what to do. And in our executive board, Russia commended us officially in the official proceedings for this campaign. They were like, "This is a great campaign." This is long before the war, but they basically stood up and said, "This is a great campaign. Thank you, UNDP," which is a huge kind of affirmation of what we were trying to do. So what we want to see is that the policymakers use this as a tool for themselves to move the conversation forward.
And Stephen, you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but can you tell us more about the role that the Public Foundation took in helping create the campaign and everything?
Yeah, so like I said, a big part was getting ready for the launch and how do we make people see it. That happens, big success. Then, collectively look at, okay, how, what next and where does it go from here? Part of our role as well was partnership development and fundraising, right? You know, finding partners out there that would kind of come with us and help expand the campaign beyond a extremely successful launch. And actually, in Cannes Lions last year, Frankie the Dino kind of came from the screen into reality, and we all, you know, put together a kind of created a costume and a very interactive physical iteration of Frankie the Dino. He made his first appearance here live at an event. It's been the week going around, and I think it was fascinating to us how much attention he created from media, from creatives, people on the beach getting out of the water to take a selfie with Frankie and then saying, what is this about? You know, like, why is he here? And it was a great way to then talk about the campaign and Don't Choose Extinction and get them involved. From there, Frankie went on to the UN General Assembly in September in New York, and also at the climate negotiations COP27 in Egypt. And it was amazing to see the power of a fun, you know, creature, and how it was able to kind of create such buzz and conversation. And then somebody like Boaz would be right there with them, getting the message out, you know. And you did that at numerous panels and events. So that was a big part of it, and being part of that from PVBLIC was an amazing opportunity. And I would say, you know, since then, there have been countries and UNDP offices and governments around the world that have requested Frankie to come. And he was recently in Colombia about a week ago in Bogota, and meeting with different people in the public and private sector, and again, the amount of attention that was created in the media was amazing. But it was linked to action, which is nice. It was linked to, like, all right, how do we advance the conversation on climate action and ending fossil fuel subsidies? So, and I think there's a video from that we want to see.
Yes.
As well.
I was going to, yes. Do you want to show the video now?
Millones de años han pasado y no lo han entendido. Extinguirse es algo malo, algo muy, muy malo. Crean excusas para no cuidar todas estas especies, toda esta biodiversidad que les rodea y que puede hacer frente a la crisis climática.
Hermoso lugar, ¿no? ¿Qué están haciendo para conservarlo?
Lovely campaign. And so the next question's for you, Nick. How important is the role of the creative industry when it comes to getting these types of messages across?
I think it's absolutely vital. At our heart, the creative industry, and I'll say the creative and branding industry, we are extraordinary storytellers. We're simplifiers. We work with a reductionist mindset. And on a good day, we can help influence and define and change culture versus ripping off culture. And I think at the heart of the best work in the world, whether you're doing something so fundamentally important at a societal level or you're encouraging someone to buy a product, we're in the art of behavior change. And if you can do it in a meaningful way and get a story across in the minimal number of words with the highest level of cut-through, with the most impactful comprehension for a level of engagement, then you're doing it. And it's sometimes, I'm a creative thinker, but I'm not a creative. I'm not a copywriter, an art director. I work with extraordinary ones with Boaz. And the art and the energy to write what could be a book in 6 or 7 or 8 words is one of the hardest skills in the world. So when they can redeploy that storytelling and that inspiration and imagination for good, and it can do something like this culturally, then it's a wonderful gift to be able to do.
And kind of my last question is for everyone here, but kind of what's next, and how do you see your respective roles evolving as you continue to get this message out? Would you like to go first?
I'll go first. You know, for me, you know, as I said, the Don't Choose Extinction campaign, I think will continue. It will evolve. We'll have different elements of it. We're launching a new campaign in November for COP28 that will be in Dubai. I'm not going to tell you anything about it, but watch that space because it's going to be very exciting. It's not going to have a dinosaur in it. That's the only thing I can say. We did this week something very, very exciting happened. If I can share with you, we launched a stamp collection for Frankie. This is the UN official stamps. So these are the UN Postal Service that actually kind of like are the main postal service of the world. So these stamps can be sent from anywhere in the world, and it's very exciting that Frankie's featured on there. We're very proud of that. So there's going to be a constant evolution of where the campaign is going, but there will be additions, there will be evolutions. We're working on very exciting projects, both in terms of what Frankie does, but also how we can have impact on biodiversity, on the planet, on the climate emergency, and all of those taken together. And we're working with a very exciting project with Deloitte that I'm also not going to say anything about, but I'm teasing it now. And there's a lot happening in this space. We need to continuously push for an acceleration and scaling of this issue at a massive level because we have a very, very short time. So there's a lot of work to do.
I'm not sure if it's my role, but what I think the two things to do are that dinosaur now is a brand. And every time that dinosaur is seen, Frankie is seen, it's a shortcut to a fossil fuel subsidy conversation, a climate change conversation. So the value in that branding mnemonic to tell a story has the ability to permutate every part of pop culture. And I know you've got some extraordinary stuff you're doing. And I think I've got 1 or 2 projects I'm working with the UNDP in a slightly different space. But I think we wouldn't have had the confidence and momentum, stakeholders, public, to be able to pursue those with such confidence and rigor. None of this would have been possible without the first steps. And I think momentum builds momentum. And when people feel safe about doing something bold and powerful, that confidence just elevates another level. And you take everyone on that journey with you. And I think that's what you've done and your team and all your partners. This is going to become one of 10. And that's what's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say we've had some important partners step forward for the launch and kind of the first year and a half of the campaign, including EarthX, which is an environmental nonprofit based in Dallas, and a number of others. Obviously, Deloitte has been a huge partner to the campaign, and have helped us get here. I would say from our role, we see the need for more partners. We're thinking about how do we attract the resources and funding to scale this and take it to the next level. And I'm excited to see what comes next in November. And I also do feel that Frankie the Dino has, he's come back from Extinction, and I think he'll live on, and you may see him pop up in a few places throughout the rest of the year.
If I can just it's impossible for us to talk about all of this work without giving a shout out to the creative directors. There's an amazing company in California called Activista. Their 2 creative directors are Paco Conde and Beto Fernandez, who are the thought behind the dinosaur. So I just want to give a very big thank you to them and a big shout out, because none of this would have been possible without.
Yeah. Yes, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the lovely campaign. And yeah,